I didn't see it coming. Maybe I didn't want to see it coming. My wife kicked me out of my studio. This is where I used to shoot videos for this channel. You'll notice now there's a couch here now. Come on, focus on my face. There's a couch here now, TV over there, and it's basically turned into a playroom. See? Look, toys, children things. My studio is now a playroom. But where's my studio, you might ask? I'll show you, and we'll talk about kind of the struggle, not the struggle, but all the things we have to deal with when we have a studio in our home. Let me show you where I am now.
Could see, lost in my mind to the insanity. I was numb, the thought I could feel. Then you called me.
Okay, so what happened? You may remember a while back I did a video about how to set up a bedroom studio, and I came back in this room, which is just a spare bedroom, and I brought in my desk and a laptop and a small interface and wheeled in some gobos to figure out how to make a just drywall walls and ceiling with a carpet floor, how to make it sound and work okay for a home studio. Well, that was fun, and I actually ended up recording a song and mixing it in here to just show that absolutely you can do it in any room. Well, my wife came downstairs the other day, and kids are back in school, so we're in kind of that mode of, okay, kids are gone for multiple hours a day, we can kind of get some things done around the house if we want to. And she said, what if we turned your studio into a playroom and you moved your studio into the spare bedroom? And I said, all right, let's try it. I don't know where that came from, but realistically, I only need about this much space for a lot of what I do. When it comes to mixing, even recording, I'm usually recording guitars and vocals. I just need, to be able to reach out and not bump my guitar on stuff, and I'm pretty good. If you remember my old setup, I was pretty much in a space similar to this. Keyboard on one side, desk on the other, studio desk here. I can do kind of most everything I need to do. If I need to record drums, great. I'll just run a snake out there in that big room. We're good to go. And then I can do mixing and editing in here. A couple of things that make this room better for me. The other room, you may recall there was a lot of air conditioner noise because one of the vent intakes was just right in the corner where it takes in air for the AC. So that whenever the air was on, it was really loud. You could hear it in some of my videos. We also have, being that this is a basement in muggy, sloppy, wet Tennessee, we have a dehumidifier that really needs to run, especially during the summer, and it's very loud, and so anytime I'm working and need to hear anything or shoot a video or mix or really anything, it's really loud, I would have to turn that off, and I would always forget to turn it back on. So our downstairs would get kind of musty, and I have to remember to turn that on again. When I'm in here, on the other end of the house, I don't hear any of that. I don't think the AC is on right now, but it's fairly quiet in here, and that dehumidifier is running out there, and I can't hear it. Plus, I'm directly beneath the edge of our kitchen, and in the other room I was directly beneath like our living room, and so if kids are running around and playing, I could hear everything because the floors were right there. There's no insulation really, just hear everything. And that meant if I need to do anything that requires quiet, like recording or shooting a video, I would have to tell them all to like go somewhere else or be quiet or give them the iPads because we're terrible parents, and then I'll get my thing done. So it ended up being this theoretically makes more sense. Also, our back door, we park right out there, and if I was working on something and the kids came home from school with my wife, they would come in and have to tiptoe upstairs because I would be in the middle of an interview or a podcast or something, because they come in through that door. So none of these are like massive problems, but I realized as soon as I moved back here just to try it out, the room itself is a challenge, but the location is pretty good. So let's talk about the room and acoustics for a minute. I have been known to say stupid things Just gonna go ahead and admit that. And one of the stupid things I've said in the past is the room isn't really that important. The room doesn't make that much difference. It's not like acoustic treatment is the be-all, end-all for home studios. Now the big asterisk I would put on those statements, if I could go back and redo it, is that room treatment and acoustic treatment doesn't matter as much in some rooms. Now, I've had a lot of experience setting up my home studio in different rooms. If you've been following Home Studio Corner since the very first video I posted, I've had a studio in, just from when I started Home Studio Corner, not before that, an apartment in Fort Wayne, Indiana, a rental home in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, an apartment in Smyrna, Tennessee, our first house. I was in 3 separate rooms in that first house because we just kept moving around trying to figure out which room was best. 3 different bedrooms. So that was 3 more locations to set up the studio. And then our second house, I was in that kind of basement that was kind of a U-shape. There's a lot of videos from there. Third house, I was in it was long and narrow, and we put up the reclaimed wood wall back behind me right before we moved, which I know. And then this house, which had the big basement, and then now back in here. So I've been, and I lost count, a lot of different spaces for my home studio. And a couple of things are true. 2 things mainly. One, I made music in all of them. Music that to my ear sounds good, and music that I'm proud of. 2, every space has its challenges and no space is perfect. So that imperfection is just a thing. The sooner we can accept that, we can just figure out ways to make it work. So those are really important. I don't say the first one to shame anyone who maybe is struggling to make music. Just to remind you, sometimes, I know this as well as anybody, we come up with excuses and reasons why we're not doing what we want to do, and they might be legitimate things like this room does not sound perfect. This room has problems. I'll talk about that in a minute. And that could force me to say, I'm not going to shoot another video for YouTube until this room is perfect. Or I'm not going to record a single note of music until this room is perfect. Or I'm not going to mix a single song until this room is perfect. And A, it'll never be perfect. And B, there's a lot of good work that can be done even in an imperfect space. Because it's an imperfect world, right? That's kind of the beauty of music. We use imperfect instruments like guitars that are never actually perfectly in tune, voices that never sing perfectly in tune, drums that are never perfectly in time. All those things make up for the beauty that we call music. So wanted to get that out there. But let's talk about specifically this room. So in a big space like out there are a couple things going for me. First, a bigger space, just in my experience, tends to not have a lot of the common problems that small rooms have. But biggest thing is you don't have a lot of parallel surfaces really close where there's a lot of slap back and that weird echo kind of stuff that happens. Secondly, that room and 2 studios ago had drop tile ceilings. So instead of a drywall ceiling like this one, it's just a flat surface, it has the ceiling's a little bit lower than the actual, well, there's floor, and then there's space of about a foot where all like the ductwork and everything goes. And then there's those drop tile, 4 foot by 2 foot or 2 foot by 2 foot ceiling. And that, even though it wasn't meant to be absorbent, it actually works as a great absorber of frequencies. And almost, I wonder if it's a little bit like a bass trap, to where you walk into that room and you hear it's a room, it's got some space to it. You clap your hands, there's like a reverberation, but it's a pleasant sounding reverberation because there's a lot of space for the sound to go, but there's carpet on the floor and there's drop tile on the ceiling, so there's not a ton of that back and forth kind of, what's that called, standing waves and that little warbly echo thing that can happen in a lot of rooms. So that alone made that room great. I didn't even realize it. I was just like, this is great. I put up some treatment, but almost just because I had it sitting around, didn't have any other reason not to. So some rooms just tend to work and sound better. If you're like probably, I'm guessing most people who watch this, you don't have a big room. And maybe you've seen me in my big room and said, oh, Joe, you're in a big room. Try making music in a small room. Well, you got it. We're going to be in this small room for now. So the biggest problem is it's not a square room, but it's pretty close. We're talking 10 by 12 or 13 or something. Like it's tight. You saw like the keyboard and the guitars and the desk and the speakers, and that's about it. I've got the speakers off the wall a little bit just to give it, sometimes up against the wall doesn't work well. Also, I need to get back there occasionally, and now I have to crawl under the desk because there's just not a lot of room. But with nothing in here, this room sounds pretty atrocious. You've just got things bouncing everywhere. In fact, I shot a video in here just to kind of test things out, and I had my treatment in a little bit different configuration, and I was sitting maybe a foot or so this way in that direction. And there was this woo, woo, woo frequency at about, I'm guessing like 500 hertz or so, that was just, every time I talked, it just resonated. Which reminds me, so I'm sure I'm not the only one who does this. Do you ever go into a stairwell or a bathroom stall, and if you're by yourself, you like, maybe you're humming a song, because I'm always humming something, but you'll notice that one particular note is a lot louder, and it's really cool if it's a low note, because you feel like you're this big, massive bass singer. So, you know, you'll be sitting there, and like the last note will go, it'll sound to your ears like, boom, and it just resonates in that space. You found a resonant frequency for that bathroom stall. That's not terribly useful to you and me in studios unless you do a lot of work in bathroom stalls. So in a studio like this, there's going to be, in a space like this, there's going to be those resonant frequencies. There's going to be plenty of low-end problems, but there's also going to be those kind of mid-rangey vocal frequency range stuff that's going to be resonant. Now, what do we do with that information? First of all, we try to treat the room as best we can to cut down on that. And secondly, we just have to be aware that there's some mid-range weirdness happening. So when we're mixing or when we're recording, we listen for that, and we try to compensate for that as best we can. Like I said before, there is no perfect room, so get that out of your head, but there are things we can do to make it better. So what have I done? You can see most of it just in the shot of this camera right now. On the back wall, in the corners, you may remember 2 studios back, I had some bass traps made. They're I think 2 or 3 inches thick, 3 feet wide. 3 feet wide? Maybe 2.5 feet wide, and they're about 7.5 feet tall, and they fit in the corners of my studio 2 houses ago behind my speakers as bass traps. So I've had those in a closet, just kind of being absorptive. You may remember that from one of the studio tours. Off to the side of my desk was a closet that I had the doors off, and those were in the back, just kind of being absorption panels. Well, now they're acting a little more like bass traps. Bass tends to build up in corners, so if you put a lot of big, thick, massive absorption in corners, it'll help to absorb some of those bass frequencies, which will end up making your room have a more balanced low end. I always thought if I put in bass traps, it's going to make the bass lower in my room, but it actually makes it higher. Not in a bad way, but it just, instead of those frequencies getting wrapped up in the corners, somehow they disperse better. I'm not smart enough to know all the ins and outs of how that works, but bass traps in the corner when you can is great. As many corners as you can. In this room, I can really only do those 2 corners. So that's the first thing I did. The second thing I did was make sure I have some absorption along the side. So if we turn the camera over here, you'll see I've got 2 panels actually just resting on my keyboard. And then over here, I've got another panel right there. They're hitting those mirror points. So these 2 panels where my speakers hit the walls and come back to my ears, I want to have absorption there so that it doesn't, sorry, you're a little close, so that it doesn't bounce off the walls and hit my ears. And so again, these are 2 inches thick, 4 foot by 2 foot panels with Owens Corning 703 or something like that, insulation inside and a cloth over the top. These were made by a buddy of mine named Graham, not Cochran, here in Nashville. Graham Wax is his name. And he's not a buddy. I met him on Craigslist and he made these for me, which is great. We should be buddies. Graham, if you're watching this, let's be buddies. So then I've got just another one here. So putting just those, the ones back there, and then I've got one of my big rolling gobos. The legs are starting to fall apart. So I've got it back here, just in front of this window. Mainly just to have more absorption back there. Also to block the light, because shooting videos with a big window behind you doesn't work super well. And then my final gobo is behind me, behind you rather, kind of mirroring this one here. So that basically means I've got absorption really heavily around the mix position, and I don't have much on this back wall yet. I've got a decent amount. I got 2 panels on this side, 1 panel on this side, and then my gobo right there that I can kind of move to position kind of where I need it, depending on what I'm recording or maybe mixing. The gobo is also in front of a closet door. So since it's hard to hang a treatment across a doorway, there's a decent sized closet back there, I decided to put my rolling gobo in front of it. That means I can roll it out of the way when I need to open the door to get my camera and things like that. But otherwise it sits there and does a lot of absorption. So places where I feel like I could use some help are like right here. This corner doesn't have anything, and then the doorway right here doesn't have really any treatment. So that's kind of 2 bare spots on the back walls on either side of that gobo and that doorway, and probably another panel on this side wall opposite this door. Because you can't hear it super well, but there's still a little small slap back. Not big. I've recorded stuff in here and it sounds fine. I would want to make that a little bit better by putting just a little more absorption. Also, I've never really in a long time put any absorption on the ceiling, but some sort of hanging thing would be great, because I've got this big, flat, reflective surface right up there. That would always be good. That's going to be the last thing on my list. I'm probably just too lazy to get like the eye bolts and figure out where the studs are and hang something. Honestly, I'm afraid I'm gonna hang something that's kind of heavy and it's gonna fall on my head. And I don't have a lot of hair to cushion it, so I'm scared. The other big problem you may have noticed is where I'm sitting in the room isn't, like right here is basically the center of the room. And I'm mixing right here. That's a big no-no in acoustic circles. Don't mix in the middle of the room. So it might be better for me to push this back towards the wall a little bit more so that I'm not in the center of the room, because that's kind of where all the problems are gonna kind of focus right there in the middle. That's where all the frequencies kind of intersect, sort of. Anyway, so I'm just trying my best when I mix to kind of be right up against the desk, kind of right up in here. Oh, hello. And then I can do recording. Shush. Then I can do just kind of be out here for videos with you, and my desk over here for writing and working on the computer over there. And then I can wheel this gobo around as needed. So if I want to get something more intimate, I could pull this gobo in. When I don't have to have a camera here, I could stand up or be sitting here, have this gobo as close as I can get it, and I'm essentially in almost a booth, with exception of some reflections here and some reflections there. Otherwise, it's gonna sound pretty decent. If I ever sing really loud, it's gonna bounce around the room, and that's gonna be a problem, but we'll just have to deal with it. I think the biggest solution, what I've found in just even moving these panels around, is you have to just play with things. I had the panels a certain way, and there was still a lot of room sound, so I moved them, and just got to places where I try to make it where there's no, as much as I can, minimize two flat surfaces facing each other. So for example, over here, where my desk is, where that Nashville sign is, that's not absorption, right? I mean, it is, it's like that thin. So it's not doing much. There's a panel here that's to the left and right of my mix position. That's a no-brainer, always have something there. But then here, I didn't have another panel. I've got one right behind you, a second panel, but I don't have one here. So in my mind, at least I've got this wall isn't facing a bare wall, it's facing some absorption. And then where that's a problem is, actually no, it's not a huge problem. On the back walls, they're both bare right now, but they're facing all this absorption behind me, so at least the sounds aren't bouncing back and forth. They may hit the back wall and then they come up and get absorbed. Not perfect, but it's okay. Also, I've got this huge gobo behind me, behind you. That's confusing. That's doing a good amount of absorption, but I still need some more absorption on these sides. The one place that's not working, this doorway and that wall there are facing each other, and there is no absorption. I've run out of panels. I need to build some more, make some more, or get something else to figure that out. And honestly, if I put panels there, and then maybe there, where essentially the wall is evenly spaced with panels. I'm not going for a dead sounding room, but some of that little bit of a small room sound should be tamed enough to where this room is totally workable. So when I've said treatment doesn't matter, it does. Especially if your room sounds like this. If you're in a bigger, sometimes rooms just sound better and you don't need a lot of treatment. For the smaller the room, a lot of times the more problematic, and also if it's just a big drywall box, it's not ideal, but you can put things up to make it work. Now, if you don't have panels, anything absorptive is good. A mattress looks ugly, but it could work. Cushions could work. You could hang things up on mic stands to give you some amount of absorption. Even blankets would be better than nothing. But stuff like this, if you're even remotely handy, you can build, or you can find someone who can build them. It's not super expensive. Or if you've got some money to spend, there are plenty of brands out there that make really nice looking panels that are easy to hang. They'll tell you how many you need and where to put them and things like that. So this video is not sponsored by any of those. It's just, they're out there. But just know that it does take a little more work, but you can get your rooms to a place where they can work. And they never have to be perfect. Don't wait for perfection. Just throw up a couple of blankets and make a record today. And in the meantime, save up and get, you can always improve it along the way. But go ahead and continue developing that habit of always making music, whatever your space looks like. And not because you should, not because Joe Gilder told you to, but because I got a sneaky suspicion that's what you want to do, and that's why you got into this whole studio stuff to begin with. All right, that's it for me. If you want more recording tips like this and you haven't checked out my recording cheat sheet, you need to. It's fabulous. It's free. Go to recordingcheatsheet.com, you'll download it. It's a handful of pages, it's a fairly quick read, but it'll give you a lot of ideas of ways to improve what you're doing on the front end when it comes to capturing, recording, and getting songs captured in such a way that when you go to mix them, they're just a breeze to mix. Check it out at recordingcheatsheet.com, and I'm gonna go play around in my studio a little more. See ya.